Welcome, dear listener, to a journey through time. As you settle in for a restful slumber, perhaps winding down after a busy day, allow yourself to be transported to a world far different from our own, Victorian England. Before we embark on this adventure, I invite you to pause for a moment and share in the comments where in the world you're listening from. It's a wonder of our modern age that we can connect across vast distances and time zones, all while exploring the past together. And if you find yourself enjoying these calm historical meanderings, I encourage you to subscribe so you can drift off to sleep with a bit of boring, but surprisingly entertaining history whenever the mood strikes. But for now, let us leave the present behind and allow ourselves to slip into a very different time and place. Hey, so tonight we're going to talk about something that'll make you super grateful for that hot shower you took today. We're diving into Victorian hygiene, and trust me, it's going to be a wild ride. Think fancy dresses and top hats? Yeah, well, let's just say what was happening underneath those beautiful clothes was not so beautiful. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. Super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location. It always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world. Alright, find that cozy spot, take a nice slow breath, and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to 1850-something London, and trust me, you're going to be real grateful for that mattress by the time we're done. So, congratulations! You just woke up in Victorian London. The first thing that hits you isn't what you see, it's what you smell. That thick, heavy, almost chewy air that seems to stick in your throat. It's like, well, imagine if someone took every smell you've ever tried to avoid and mixed them all together in a big steaming pot. Human waste, rotting garbage, smoke from thousands of coal fires, and something else. Something sweet and sick and wrong that you can't quite place. You shift slightly in your bed, whatever bed you're lucky enough to have, and immediately feel how different everything is. The sheets, if you have sheets, feel rough against your skin, scratchy, nothing like the soft cotton you're used to. And they smell, well, let's just say fabric softener won't be invented for another century or so. Good news, you're alive. Bad news, well, basically everything else. Let's start with where you are. If you're poor, which most people were, you're probably sharing a room with, maybe 6 or 8 other people. Could be your family, could be strangers. Doesn't really matter, because privacy is pretty much a luxury only rich folks can afford. The room is maybe 10 feet by 12 feet. That's it. And everyone's just there, breathing each other's air, sharing each other's, well, everything. The walls are damp, always damp. There's this weird green stuff growing in the corners that nobody talks about, but everybody pretends not to see. Your breathing naturally slows in and out as you take in this strange, smelly new world. If you're middle class, and lucky you if you are, things are better. You might have your own bedroom, maybe even your own bed. But better is relative. Your house still doesn't have running water, still doesn't have electricity, and that bathroom you're thinking about, yeah, that's not really a thing yet. The Great Victorian Cleanliness Conspiracy. Now here's where it gets interesting. Everyone in this era thinks they're clean, like genuinely believes they're maintaining good hygiene. It's just that their definition of clean is, well, let's call it different. Take bathing, for example. You know, that daily shower you took, that long, hot, relaxing wash where you shampooed your hair and scrubbed every inch of your body. Forget it. Not happening. In fact, if you suggested taking a full bath every day, people would think you were genuinely insane. A comfortable sigh escapes because even thinking about their bathing schedule makes you appreciate that warm shower even more. See, Victorians believed that bathing too much was actually dangerous, like medically harmful. They thought all that water would weaken your constitution, make you sick, maybe even kill you. So most people? They'd take a full bath maybe once a week if they were fancy. If they were poor, maybe once a month, maybe. But here's the thing. They weren't just sitting around dirty. They had this whole system worked out. It was called a sponge bath. And basically you'd wash the important bits. Face, hands, armpits, and the naughty bits. That was it. Everything else? Well, everything else could wait until bath day. Picture this. You're standing in your bedroom, because that's where most people washed, next to a little wooden stand with a bowl and a pitcher of cold water. Cold because hot water on demand. That's basically magic at this point. You pour the water into the bowl, grab a cloth or a sponge, and you just spot clean. Like you're detailing a car, but the car is your body and the detailing is minimal. Your shoulders drop, releasing some of that tension as you imagine how different their mornings must have been. The wealthy folks, they had it a bit better. Some of them had these fancy copper bathtubs that servants would fill with hot water carried up from the kitchen. But even they weren't bathing daily. Maybe twice a week if they were real hygiene enthusiasts. And get this, multiple people would often use the same bath water. Dad goes first, then Mum, then the kids in order of age. By the time little Billy gets his turn, that water is, well, let's just say it's more like soup than water. Teaching people how to take a bath, can you imagine? Bath for dummies, but in 1858. These books had rules because apparently that could kill you. Don't wash your face when travelling unless you can purify the water with alcohol or ammonia first. Or take Russian baths, where you wash your face with extremely hot water, then extremely cold water to prevent wrinkles. Getting more comfortable now, settling deeper into your bed, and honestly, their bathing advice sounds exhausting. The unbearable lightness of being stinky. Now let's talk about teeth. Oh boy, let's talk about teeth. Toothbrushes existed, but they were expensive and, how do I put this, not great. They had wooden handles and bristles that were basically just really stiff animal hair. Like, imagine brushing your teeth with a tiny scrub brush, one that costs about as much as you'd spend on groceries for a week. So, what did poor people do? Well, they got creative. Some people used celery, just chewed on celery and hoped for the best. Others made their own toothpaste out of chalk, soot, or powdered cuttlefish bone. Yeah, cuttlefish bone in your mouth. On purpose. And if you had a toothache, well, good luck with that. Most places didn't have dentists. Instead, you'd go to your local barber or blacksmith. The same guy who cuts hair and shoes horses is now going to poke around in your mouth with whatever tools he's got handy. No anesthesia, no proper training, just hope for the best and try not to scream too loud. A yawn escapes and you're suddenly very grateful for modern dentistry. Hair washing was its own adventure. Remember, no shampoo. So what did people use? Well, eggs. Women would crack eggs over their heads and work the yolks into their hair like they were making breakfast on their scalp. Then they'd rinse it out with pitchers of water. The smell must have been interesting. Other popular options included vinegar mixed with water, black tea, rum or rosemary. Basically, if it was in the kitchen and liquid, someone probably tried washing their hair with it. The wealthy had access to fancier concoctions, but even they were basically making their own shampoo out of whatever was lying around. And here's the kicker. They only washed their hair maybe once a month. Maybe. Women's hair was considered their crowning glory, so they'd pile it up in elaborate styles and leave it that way for weeks. They'd add oils and pomades to keep it healthy, but, well, those oils would go rancid after a while. So their beautiful hair would smell like rancid fat. Lovely. You shift slightly, finding a more comfortable position as you think about how different their daily routines must have been. Laundry day, a humiliation marathon. Laundry was a whole other nightmare. No washing machines, obviously. Everything had to be done by hand. And soap was expensive, so people got creative. Oil stains were treated with chalk. Blood and grass stains were removed with kerosene. Other odours were fought with milk. And, for bleaching, well, they'd soak their clothes in urine. Human urine. Because urine contains ammonia, which is actually a pretty good cleaning agent. But still, urine. The whole process took forever. You'd haul water, heat it up, scrub everything by hand, rinse it, and then hang it to dry. A full wash day could take all day. Literally, all day. So most people only did laundry once a week if they were lucky. Some people went longer, which means, well, people wore the same clothes for days at a time, sometimes weeks. That beautiful Victorian outfit you're picturing, it probably hadn't been washed in a while. Nice and easy, just breathing and thinking about how much effort it took just to stay basically clean. Let's talk about underwear, or well, the lack thereof. Most poor people didn't wear underwear at all. None. The wealthy might have linen undergarments, But even those weren't changed very often. And women's clothing? Oh boy, layers and layers of heavy fabric. Corsets that hadn't been washed in months. Petticoats that... let's not even think about petticoats. All of this clothing would absorb sweat, body odour, food smells, smoke from fires, everything. And it would just stay there, trapped in the fabric, until the next wash day, which, remember, might not be for weeks. So picture walking down a London street in the summer. Hundreds of people, all wearing heavy, unwashed clothing, all smelling like, well, themselves. Plus whatever they'd eaten for breakfast, plus smoke from coal fires, plus horse manure from the streets, plus... well, you get me. You get the idea. The smell would be intense, like a physical presence following you around, something you could taste in the air. Your breathing naturally slows, settling deeper into this strange world where staying clean was a daily struggle nobody really won. London, the great stink and its unexpected hero. And that was just personal hygiene. We haven't even talked about the streets yet. Oh, the streets. London in the 1850s was home to about 2 million people. That's a lot of people making a lot of mess. And there was no organised garbage collection, no street cleaning. People just threw their garbage out the window into the street, where it would sit and rot and attract rats. Human waste was, well, that's a whole other story. Most houses didn't have toilets. Instead, people used chamber pots. Basically, you'd do your business in a pot under your bed, and then, well, someone had to empty it. Usually into the street, or into a shared privy in the backyard, or, if you were really lazy, just out the window. There were people called night soil men who would come around and empty the cesspools and privies, but they only worked at night because the job was considered too disgusting for daylight hours. And where did all that waste go? Well, mostly into the Thames, London's main river. The same river people got their drinking water from, yeah. Think about that for a minute. You settle deeper into your bed, muscles relaxing as you try to imagine living in a world where the river you drink from is also the place everyone dumps their sewage. The horses made it worse. London ran on horsepower. Thousands and thousands of horses pulling carriages, delivery wagons, omnibuses. And horses? Well, horses poop a lot. It was estimated that a single horse produced about 35 pounds of manure per day. Multiply that by thousands of horses, and, well, you do the math. All of this waste would pile up in the streets. When it rained, it would wash around, creating these, let's call them, rivers of nastiness. When it was dry, it would bake in the sun and create clouds of dust. Dust that was, well, let's just say you didn't want to breathe it. And yet people did breathe it, every day. They walked through it. They lived with it. They thought it was normal. Because, well, when everyone smells the same and everyone's environment is gross, gross becomes normal. That's it, getting more comfortable, your muscles melting into the mattress as you think about how lucky you are to live in a time with soap and running water and actual garbage collection. The thing is, Victorians weren't stupid. They knew things were unpleasant. They just didn't really understand why people kept getting sick. They had this theory called miasma theory, that basically said diseases were caused by bad air, bad smells. They thought if you could smell something foul, it could make you sick. Which, I mean, they weren't completely wrong. Bad smells usually meant bad sanitation, and bad sanitation definitely led to disease. But they thought the smell itself was the problem, not the underlying conditions causing the smell. So their solution was perfume. Lots and lots of perfume. Instead of fixing the source of the smell, they just tried to cover it up. Rich people would douse themselves in expensive fragrances. Poor people would use whatever they could find, maybe some cheap cologne, or flowers, or herbs. But here's the thing about trying to cover up the smell of unwashed bodies, unwashed clothes, and sewage-filled streets with perfume. It doesn't really work. It just creates this weird, sickly sweet combination that's somehow worse than the original smell. Imagine vanilla air freshener mixed with, well, a porta potty. That's basically what wealthy Victorians smelled like. A comfortable sigh escapes, and you're so grateful for modern understanding of hygiene and disease. Beauty, brains, and accidental poison. Women had it particularly rough. Their clothing was even more complicated than men's. layers and layers of heavy fabric, corsets that made breathing difficult, long skirts that dragged on the ground, picking up everything, and they were expected to look perfect at all times. Makeup existed, but it was dangerous. Face powder often contained lead. Rouge contained mercury. And since people didn't understand what these chemicals could do to the human body, well, many Victorian women were literally poisoning themselves in the name of beauty. Hair dye was even worse. There was this popular product called Hall's Hair Renewer that promised to hide grey hair and restore youthful colour. The secret ingredient? Lead. People were rubbing lead directly into their scalps, wondering why they felt sick all the time. Your shoulders drop, releasing that tension as you think about how much we've learned about chemistry and safety. And then there were the beauty routines. Without modern skincare, people came up with interesting solutions. They'd use lemon juice to lighten freckles, butter to moisturize dry skin, raw meat as face masks. They'd sleep with slices of raw beef on their faces, thinking it would keep them looking young. The smell in a Victorian bedroom, especially a wealthy Victorian bedroom with all these beauty treatments, must have been complex. Raw meat, lead-based cosmetics, unwashed hair with rancid pomade, and whatever perfume they were using to try to cover it all up. But, you know what? They made do. They adapted. They found ways to feel clean and attractive within the constraints of their world. It's actually kind of impressive when you think about it. They were working with what they had, doing their best with the knowledge available to them. Getting cozy now, really settling in, and there's something almost admirable about their resourcefulness, even if their methods were questionable. The wealthy had servants to help with the worst of it, maids to empty chamber pots, laundresses to deal with the clothes, bath attendants to heat and carry water. But the servants themselves, well, they were often even dirtier than their employers. They couldn't afford to take time for personal hygiene when they were busy maintaining everyone else's. Poor people just did their best, shared resources, helped each other out, and accepted that being clean was a luxury they couldn't afford. They focused on survival, on finding enough food to eat, enough work to pay rent, enough coal to keep warm. Hygiene was something you worried about when you had everything else figured out. And in 1850-something London, most people definitely did not have everything else figured out. Nice and easy, breathing deeply as you imagine trying to navigate daily life in a world where everything was harder. Where taking a bath was an event that required planning. Where brushing your teeth was a luxury. Where staying clean was a constant battle against a dirty world. The Great Stink of 1858, a parliamentarian's nightmare. The funny thing is, they probably would have looked at our modern obsession with cleanliness and thought we were crazy. Daily showers, changing clothes every day, washing our hands multiple times a day. They would have worried we were washing away our natural defences, making ourselves weak and susceptible to disease. Different times, different knowledge, different priorities. But underneath all the dirt and smell and questionable hygiene practices, these were still people, still families, trying to make the best life they could for themselves and their children. They fell in love, told jokes, worried about money, celebrated birthdays. They had hopes and dreams and fears, just like anyone else. They just smelled a lot worse while doing it. Settling deeper, that heavy, comfortable feeling spreading through your body as the strange world of Victorian London starts to feel a little more real, a little more human, despite all its challenges and unpleasant realities. But let's talk about something that'll really make you appreciate modern plumbing. Victorian toilets, or, well, the lack thereof. You know that bathroom down the hall, the one with running water and toilet paper and a seat that's actually comfortable? Yeah, forget about it. Most Victorians had never seen anything like that. Instead, they had alternatives. Your muscles relax as you think about how simple it is to just walk to the bathroom when you need to. If you were poor, and again, most people were, you shared an outhouse with maybe 100 other families. Picture this. One wooden shack built over a deep pit in a shared courtyard behind a row of houses. No privacy, no paper, no way to wash your hands afterward. Just a hole in the ground with a wooden seat over it. The smell! Oh my god, the smell! Especially in summer. It was like a physical wall you had to walk through just to get close to the thing. And the flies. So many flies, they'd swarm around the opening and you'd just have to deal with it. A yawn escapes and you're suddenly very grateful for indoor plumbing. The wealthy had it better, but not by much. They had these things called water closets, basically early toilets that were installed right in the house. Sounds fancy, right? Well, here's the catch. They didn't have modern plumbing, so where did all that waste go? Straight down into a cesspool in the basement. Yeah, a big open pit of human waste directly under the house, just sitting there fermenting. The idea was that eventually someone would come and empty it. But, well, that didn't always happen on schedule. When the cesspool got full, the smell would start seeping up through the floorboards. The whole house would reek. People would wake up in the morning feeling sick from the fumes that had been building up overnight. So they'd call the night soil men. These were the guys who specialised in emptying cesspools and privies. They only worked at night because, well, the job was considered too disgusting for daylight hours. Can you imagine? The work was so gross that it was literally illegal to do it when people could see. Your breathing naturally slows, settling deeper as you try to imagine living above a basement full of sewage. These night soil men would show up with shovels and buckets and, well, they'd dig. They'd haul buckets of human waste up from the basement and load it onto carts. The smell during this process was indescribable. Neighbours would close their windows and stuff rags under their doors, but the stench would still seep in. And where did all this waste go? Well, that's where it gets interesting. See, human waste was actually valuable. Farmers needed fertiliser, and, well, human poop makes excellent fertiliser. So the night soil men would sell it. They'd cart it out to farms outside the city and sell it to farmers who would spread it on their fields, which means the vegetables you'd eat for dinner were literally grown in human waste from the city, where people were dying of cholera and typhoid and God knows what else. The cycle was, well, it was pretty gross when you think about it. Getting more comfortable and honestly, thinking about their farming practices makes you appreciate modern agriculture. Joseph Bazalgette, the sewer king. But here's the thing, even this system was breaking down. By the 1850s, London was just too big, too many people producing too much waste. The night soil men couldn't keep up. Cesspools were overflowing, streets were flooded with sewage when it rained, and diseases were spreading like wildfire. People were getting desperate. Some folks just gave up on the cesspool system entirely. They dumped their chamber pots directly into the street, or out the window, or into the nearest river or stream. And guess what? All those rivers and streams led to the Thames, London's main source of drinking water. So people were literally drinking water, contaminated with their own sewage, and wondering why they kept getting sick. Your shoulders drop, releasing that tension as you think about how obvious the connection seems now. The government knew there was a problem. Scientists knew there was a problem. Hell, everyone with a nose knew there was a problem. But nobody could agree on what to do about it. Some people thought the solution was to build more cesspools. Others wanted to dump everything into the Thames and let the river carry it away. Still others thought they should just live with it. After all, London had always smelled bad. Why change now? And then came the summer of 1858. Oh boy, the summer of 1858. It was hot, like really hot. Temperatures that London just wasn't used to, day after day of blazing sun and no rain. The Thames started running low, leaving thick deposits of sewage on the riverbanks. And in that heat, well, things started to ferment. The smell was beyond description. Imagine every gross smell you've ever encountered, multiply it by 1,000, and then imagine having to breathe it 24 hours a day. People were vomiting just from walking near the river. Families were abandoning their homes if they lived too close to the Thames. A comfortable sigh escapes, and you're so thankful for modern waste management. The press started calling it the Great Stink, and it was great in the worst possible way. Charles Dickens wrote about it, calling the Thames a deadly sewer in the place of a fine, fresh river. Scientists took boat trips along the river, dropping pieces of white paper into the water to test how dirty it was. The paper disappeared instantly into the brown, soupy mess. But you know what finally got the government to act? When the smell reached Parliament. See, the Houses of Parliament sit right on the banks of the Thames, and in the summer of 1858, With the windows open for ventilation, well, the smell just poured in. Members of Parliament were literally fleeing the chamber, handkerchiefs pressed to their noses, gagging and retching. They tried dousing the curtains with lime and chloride to mask the smell. Didn't work. They considered relocating the entire government away from Westminster. That's how bad it was. The smell was so horrific that they were willing to abandon their brand new, expensive Parliament building rather than deal with it. Finally, they decided to do something about the sewage. That's it. Just relaxing into the story, thinking about how sometimes it takes a crisis to force change. They put a guy named Joseph Bazalgette in charge of fixing London's sewage problem. Poor bastard. Can you imagine getting that job? Hey Joe, we need you to figure out what to do with 2.5 million people's worth of poop, and we need it done yesterday. But Bazalgette was brilliant. He came up with a plan that was, well, it was audacious. He wanted to build a completely new sewer system for the entire city. Not just patch the old one, build a brand new one from scratch. The plan involved building over 1,000 miles of new sewers under London streets. These sewers would connect to main intercepting sewers that would carry all the waste downstream, away from the city centre, way downstream, like 8 miles downstream, where it would be dumped into the Thames at high tide. The scale of the project was insane. They had to dig up half the city, demolish entire neighbourhoods, relocate thousands of families, build massive pumping stations to move the sewage uphill, line everything with millions of bricks, create embankments along the Thames to house the new sewers. Your breathing slows, nice and easy, as you imagine the incredible amount of work this must have required. The unsung heroes of modern life. It took years of constant construction, constant noise, constant disruption, streets torn up everywhere, the smell of cement and brick dust mixing with the smell of sewage, workers covered in mud and worse, digging tunnels deep underground. And the cost? Oh, the cost. In today's money, we're talking about billions of pounds, maybe tens of billions. The government had to raise taxes, issue bonds, borrow money from banks. People complained constantly about the expense, but you know what? It worked. When the new sewer system finally came online, the change was immediate. The smell disappeared. The Thames started running cleaner. Disease rates plummeted. People could actually walk along the river without gagging. It was like magic. All those years of living with the stench, and suddenly it was just gone. Settling deeper into your bed, feeling that heavy, comfortable weight, and thinking about how amazing it must have felt to finally be able to breathe clean air. The new system wasn't perfect, of course. They were still dumping raw sewage into the Thames, just further downstream where it was someone else's problem. And the pumping stations broke down sometimes, causing temporary backups and overflows. But compared to what they'd been living with, it was a miracle. Unfortunately, not everyone benefited equally. The wealthy neighbourhoods got connected to the new system first. The poor areas? Well, they had to wait, sometimes for years. So while the rich were enjoying their new odour-free lives, the poor were still dealing with overflowing cesspools and sewage in the streets. Some things never change, right? But even for the poor, things gradually got better as more areas got connected to the new system. Public health improved across the board. Cholera outbreaks became less frequent. Typhoid rates dropped. People stopped dying from diseases that were entirely preventable. A yawn slips out and you're thinking about how much we take for granted. Clean water, functioning sewers, toilet paper. Speaking of toilet paper, yeah, that wasn't really a thing yet. The first commercially produced toilet paper wasn't sold until the 1870s, and even then it was expensive and not very common. So what did people use? Well, whatever they could find. Old newspapers were popular among the middle class. Corn cobs were common in rural areas. Leaves, if you could find them. Rags that could be washed and reused. The wealthy might have soft cloths or even sponges, but most people just made do with whatever was available. And since there was no running water in most bathrooms, well, hand washing after using the toilet wasn't exactly standard practice. Which brings us back to disease. So much disease. Cholera was the big killer. It would sweep through London in waves, killing thousands of people at a time. Poor areas were hit hardest because they had the worst sanitation, but the disease didn't discriminate. Rich people died too. And doctors had no idea what caused it. Remember, this was before germ theory, before people understood that diseases were caused by bacteria and viruses. They thought cholera was caused by bad air, by breathing in the foul smells from sewage and rotting garbage. Your muscles relax, sinking deeper into the mattress as you think about how scary it must have been to live in a world where disease struck randomly and doctors couldn't explain why. So their treatments were, well, let's call them creative. They'd try to purify the air with strong-smelling herbs. They'd burn sulfur or tar to create smoke that would supposedly chase away the disease. They'd give patients massive doses of opium or alcohol, thinking it would help them fight off the infection. None of it worked, of course. People kept dying. Families would lose multiple members in a single outbreak. Children were especially vulnerable. And through it all, the sewage kept flowing into the Thames, the same river people were drinking from. There was this one doctor, John Snow, who figured out the connection between contaminated water and cholera. He proved that people were getting sick from drinking sewage-contaminated water, not from breathing bad air. But nobody believed him. The medical establishment thought he was crazy. It wasn't until years later, after the great stink and the new sewer system, that people started to accept his theory. By then, thousands of people had died needlessly. Nice and easy, just breathing and thinking about how frustrating it must have been to know the solution but not be able to convince anyone to listen. Adapt, survive, and maybe still stink. Even after the sewers were built, old habits died hard. People were so used to dumping waste wherever was convenient that they kept doing it. Chamber pots still went out windows. Garbage still got thrown into the street. Factory waste still flowed into rivers. It took a generation for people to really change their behaviour, to understand that where you put your waste actually mattered, that rivers weren't just convenient dumps, they were water sources that other people depended on. The new sewer system helped, but it wasn't a complete solution. It was more like a really good start, a foundation that future generations could build on. And build on it they did. Over the decades that followed, London kept improving its sanitation systems. They added treatment plants, they built better pumps, they connected more neighbourhoods, they started regulating what factories could dump into the sewers. Slowly, very slowly, London transformed from one of the dirtiest cities in the world to one of the cleanest. Your breathing naturally deepens, settling into that warm, heavy feeling as you think about the incredible transformation that happened over just a few decades. The irony is that all this infrastructure, the sewers, the treatment plants, the regulations, it's basically invisible to most people. You turn on a tap and clean water comes out. You flush a toilet and waste disappears. You walk down the street and it doesn't smell like an open sewer. We don't think about it because it works so well, because people like Bazalgette did their job so thoroughly that we can just take it for granted. But for Victorians, especially in those years before the new sewer system, dealing with waste was a constant daily struggle. Every trip to the privy was an ordeal. Every drink of water was a gamble. Every breath of air carried the smell of decay and disease. They lived with it because they had to, because they didn't know there was an alternative, because they thought that's just how cities worked. Getting more comfortable, muscles melting into the bed, and feeling so grateful for all the invisible infrastructure that makes modern life possible. Even their clothes reflected the reality of living in a dirty world. Dark colours were popular because they hid stains better. Heavy fabrics were preferred because they lasted longer between washings. Elaborate decorations and patterns helped disguise spots and smudges. Fashion wasn't just about looking good, it was about looking good in a world where staying clean was nearly impossible. Women's long skirts weren't just fashionable, they were practical. They hid dirty shoes and stockings. They swept along the ground, picking up mud and refuse, but that was better than having your legs exposed to all the filth in the streets. Men's dark suits served the same purpose. Coal dust, horse manure, sewage splashback, it all blended into dark wool. A gentleman could walk through the streets of London and still look relatively presentable when he arrived at his destination. That's it. Nice and relaxed, thinking about how every aspect of their lives was shaped by the reality of living in a dirty world. And yet, they persevered. They found ways to be happy, to celebrate, to find beauty in their world despite all its challenges. They fell in love and got married and raised families. They wrote poetry and painted pictures and composed music. They were human beings, just like us. They just smelled a lot worse while doing it. Settling deeper, that heavy, comfortable feeling spreading through your body as the strange world of Victorian London starts to feel a little more real, a little more human, despite all its challenges and unpleasant realities. And so, as you drift off to sleep, let your mind wander back to that distant time and place, to the bustling, often pungent streets of Victorian London. Let yourself imagine the lives of the rich and the poor, the clean and the less clean, all playing their parts in the great drama of human history. And as you do so, take comfort in the knowledge that your own life, however small and insignificant it may seem, is also a part of that great story. A thread in the tapestry of human experience that stretches back to the dawn of time and forward into the unknown future. For in the end, that is the great lesson of the Victorian era, that even amidst incredible challenges and less than ideal hygiene, humanity finds a way to innovate, adapt, and build a better future. And sometimes, all it takes is a really, really bad smell to get things done. Good night, dear listener, and may your dreams be filled with the wonders of clean water, fresh air, and the knowledge that your toothbrush is a truly miraculous invention. Sleep well, and may the blessings of modern plumbing be with you always.